Welcome to the Anxiety Coaches Podcast, a relaxing and informative show where we explore anxiety, panic, and PTSD, sharing how you can overcome them for life.
Aloha! Welcome back to the Anxiety Coaches Podcast. I'm your host and coach, Gina Ryan, and I am so happy to be with you again today as together we can consider the many ways to bring your mind and body back to its natural peace and calm. In today's episode, I'm talking about understanding anxiety, but we're talking about it via Claire Weeks. She and her compassionate perspective on healing have made a big impact on my life. But first, let me tell you, I didn't find Claire Weeks until long after I had been out of the wormhole and was no longer struggling with anxiety and looking for, quote, the cure. I had a client this week who actually reminded me of my love of Claire Weeks' work. And so I thought I would just jump on today and share with you my view of Claire Weeks' work and how it can really help you, and how I wish I had found her decades before I did. But I didn't. I still read her book. I still listened to her on YouTube, and you should too. I will have a link to her book, Hope and Help for Your Nerves, which I believe is the best one for you to read. It'll be in the show notes, so you can just link on that. Or you can look it up on Amazon yourself, or maybe it's at your library. I bet it is. So, a little too late, but I still love her, and she has, of course, informed my work here with you because she makes it so clear. It's so simple. And she resonated with me because that's what I believed. When I read her work, I was like, this is exactly how I got to where I was. I mean, with a lot of bumps and bruises along the way of things that didn't work. But what I finally distilled down to what worked for me, it was really along the same lines as Claire Weeks. And what I found is it wasn't fighting, and it wasn't avoiding, and it wasn't being super strong and all of that. It was about accepting. It was about floating. It was about understanding what was going on. So anyway, let's talk about Claire Weeks. She was an Australian doctor and a pioneer in the field of anxiety disorders. She developed a unique approach to curing anxiety and panic. She emphasized understanding and accepting the symptoms rather than fighting or avoiding them. Her method gained widespread recognition and has been highly influential in treating anxiety. Dr. Weeks believed that anxiety and panic are normal bodily responses to stress, and that an individual can learn to overcome them by changing their attitudes and responses to these sensations. She emphasized the importance of educating oneself about anxiety and panic, recognizing the physical symptoms, and understanding that they are not harmful or life-threatening. I'm telling you, once you get that piece, it vaults you forward so far. Her approach is often referred to as the self-help or acceptance-based approach, focusing on 4 key principles. So let's look at what those 4 key principles are that she's known for. Facing the fear. And you will hear me saying this through many, many episodes. I talk about face, accept, float, and let time pass. Now, her thing is a little bit different, but it does include all of those. So let's look at her first one, facing the fear. Instead of trying to escape or avoid anxious situations, Dr. Weeks encouraged individuals to confront them. She believed that the body's fear response would naturally diminish over time by facing the fear and allowing the anxious feelings to be present without fighting them. I hope you could hear that because that's super important. that the fear response will naturally diminish, and it takes time, by facing the fear and allowing the anxious feelings to be present without fighting. Next up, she has number 2 of accepting and floating through. Dr. Weeks emphasized the importance of accepting the anxious sensations and, quote, floating through them rather than resisting or struggling against them. This involved adopting a non-judgmental and non-reactive attitude toward the symptoms, allowing them to come and go without attaching excessive significance to them. And this is where we get stuck all the time, right? We attach significance to these symptoms and sensations. This is a hard habit to break, but you can do it. If I could do it, you can do it too. Next, she had letting time pass. Dr. Weeks recognized that anxiety and panic symptoms can be intense but temporary. She encouraged individuals to have patience and let time pass, as the intensity of the symptoms would naturally subside on their own. Again, another thing that we don't always believe will happen, because mostly when we're anxious, we don't have a lot of patience. So we can't even believe, like, what do you mean I have to let time pass? I have to just be with this? Yes, you have to just be with this and let some time pass and let the stress hormones subside, right? They rise and fall. They never keep going as that big, huge wave. It always comes back down again. If we let it without adding new stress hormones to it. But we live in a world where we have one stress and we're not even barely over that one and we got a new one. So we have to learn to take care of that ourselves. And her 4th step was rebuilding life. Once anxiety symptoms start to diminish, Dr. Weeks emphasized the importance of gradually reintroducing normal activities and routines. By resuming daily life and engaging in meaningful activities, individuals could regain confidence and prevent the fear from taking control. Now, not everybody has completely backed out of their life and has to go back in and rebuild their life. But I bet you've backed out of some things. I bet you've avoided things. I bet you have made your life a little bit smaller in some ways. But as you get feeling more confident, you can re-enter those places in your life again. You can rebuild your life. So addressing anxiety and panic is crucial for overall mental health. We know this because we know that these stress conditions can significantly impact our well-being and our quality of life. Untreated anxiety and panic disorders can lead to more chronic distress, avoidance behaviors, and even the development of other mental health conditions. So by following Dr. Weeks' approach or seeking professional help with a therapist, with a coach, in a group, individuals can effectively manage anxiety and panic, leading to improved mental health and overall well-being. So I got to thinking, why don't I just share with you how Claire Weeks described anxiety and panic? Her way of looking at anxiety and panic was in a compassionate and insightful manner, emphasizing the physical and psychological experiences associated with these conditions. She believed in demystifying anxiety and panic by helping people understand their symptoms and reassuring them that these sensations are not harmful or indicative of severe medical conditions. Now that's important because we all think that. when we're going through it, we think this is it. This was the big one. This is huge. I'm either off my rocker mentally or my body is in some severe, life-threatening, diseased state. And we live in that. And what does that do? That keeps those stress hormones pumping. So her attitude of teaching people that these sensations are not harmful or indicative of severe mental conditions was, I think it was out of this world when she put it out there. I don't think people believed her. But we now know that it's very true and it is the way out. Weeks described anxiety as a normal bodily response to stress, a nervous illness that arises when the body's natural fear response becomes sensitized and overactive. So it's not that you're broken. You have a normal bodily response to stress, a quote, nervous illness. And this is what arises when the body's natural fear response becomes sensitized and overactive. She acknowledged the physical manifestations of anxiety, such as the rapid heart rate, shortness of breath, trembling, the sense of impending doom. That was a big one for me. Weeks emphasized that anxiety is not a sign of weakness or insanity, but a common human experience that can be understood and managed. Now let's think about that for a minute. Boy, we could all use a dose of that, couldn't we? Because we don't hear that message really out there. I don't know where I mean by out there, but I think you know. Anxiety is not a sign of weakness or insanity, but a common human experience that can be understood and managed. And by managed, she meant you can manage to get yourself out of it. Because if you are living in a crazy world that is pushing you to the edge every single day, are you broken or is it the world that's broken? That's how I'm looking at it. Of course, people have had anxiety and nervous illness. Always, that's been out there. But it is so prevalent now that I wonder if our environment is not pushing us further to that brink. But it is not a sign of weakness or insanity, but a common human experience that can be understood and managed. Dr. Weeks described panic as an intense fear response that can result in panic attacks. She highlighted the sudden and overwhelming nature of panic attacks, characterized by a surge of frightening physical symptoms, including a racing heart, chest pain, difficulty breathing, and a feeling of losing control. Dr. Weeks acknowledged that panic attacks can be terrifying and distressing, often leading individuals to fear the recurrence of such episodes. And that's where the cycle begins, right, guys? This is where we go, oh no, I don't want that to happen again. Oh no. And it's just that, oh no, that's the problem. We are worried about something that isn't here. We are distressing, rather, about something that isn't here. However, Weeks emphasized that anxiety and panic are not life-threatening conditions. She believed that individuals can learn to overcome these experiences by changing their responses and attitudes toward them. Weeks encouraged individuals to face their fears, accept physical sensations without resistance, and allow time for the symptoms to subside naturally. Claire Weeks provided a compassionate and empowering perspective on anxiety and panic, emphasizing understanding, acceptance, and gradual recovery. Now, I want to say something here about that gradual recovery as a side note, because, again, when we're anxious, we don't have a lot of patience, but you have to be willing to believe that you will gradually recover, that it isn't like a light switch. It isn't like taking a pill. It isn't like having a bone set and it's out of whack and now it's back in whack. Oh, let's use the bone, the broken bone. How long does that take to recover? Overnight? No. Gradual recovery. Gradually, over time, with you being compassionate to yourself, understanding and accepting, then you too will recover. Her approach aimed to alleviate the fear and distress that's associated with these conditions and empower people to regain control over their lives. Now, while I had already climbed out of the wormhole when I found her work, I find it empowering, and I hope that you will too. My hope is that you will understand that this isn't just me saying these things and just my experience and how I came out of it, because I know there's a lot of different ways that people treat anxiety and panic, and a lot of different ways that people believe that you can or cannot get better from it. Well, I totally believe you can get better from it, and I don't think I say that enough on the show. And the client that I spoke with earlier this week reminded me of that. You have to believe that you can do this. And I'm telling you, how many people had been helped by Claire Weeks? They didn't see her, they read her book. You can read her book too. You can listen to this show for extra ideas and ways, things that I did. But I'm telling you that you have to know in your soul that you can get better. I get letters from people all the time that didn't see me even as a client. They listened to the show. They got better. They no longer struggle with this. You can do that too. Just stop fighting. Believe that this is possible because you're not broken. This is your body's response to stress. And you have become overly excitable. And all of that can be relieved and tamed down again. You will get there. I believe you will. Remember, we never know who is struggling with anxiety, so if you're moved, please share the show, and let's all find more peace and calm together. And now for today's quote. Be prepared to think and feel anything. Let come what will. And that's from Claire Weeks. I'll be back in a few more days with another podcast. Until then, be well and aloha.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode of the Anxiety Coaches Podcast. Find more information at theanxietycoachespodcast.com.